Okay. Let me call to order this meeting of the City of Bloomington Plan Commission for April 11th, 2022. Can we start by calling the roll, please?
I think, yeah, here she goes.
Okay, I'm sorry for the delay. Ballard,
Oh, we can't hear her. Just a
Can't
sec,
hear me?
Darla.
you can't hear me?
Okay, Darla, try again.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Ballard? Present. Burrell? Here. Seabour? Here. Cockrum?
Here.
Herrera? He said he was going to be late. I didn't know if he got there or not. Kinsey? Here. Smith?
Here.
St. John?
Here.
And Whistler?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, we have a quorum, so we will proceed. Just a little preview of tonight's agenda. We have three petitions that have been continued to our May meeting. I'll just quickly go through those just in case you're here for those and you'll have to come back. But we have PUD DP 2421, petitioner Robert V. Shaw, the property at North Prowl Road, 3500 block of North Hackberry Street. That has been continued to May. SP 05-22, MHG Apartments, 1210, 1220, 1320, 1404, and 1414 West Arlington Road. That case has also been continued to May. And finally, SP 06-22, Strausser Construction, Inc., the property at 3000 and 3070 South Walnut Street. That petition has been continued to May. We have one item on the consent agenda tonight. That's SP 1422, Lofton East 3rd LLC, property at 2611 East 3rd Street, and two petitions that will receive a full hearing, including public comment tonight. Those are DP 0822, Walnut Pike Development LLC at 3111 South Walnut Street Pike, and SP 1522, Walnut Star LLC, property at 3391 South Walnut Street. So that's the agenda for this evening. Before we get into those petitions, do we have minutes to be approved? I believe we have minutes from the March meeting. Are there any questions or corrections to the minutes from the March 14th meeting that were included in the packet? I was not present for that meeting, so I can't comment, but any other questions or corrections for those minutes, or a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the March minutes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the March 14 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, those minutes are approved. Do we have any reports, resolutions, or communications from staff this evening?
Sorry, trying to do some technical stuff here. No, we do not. Let me think. No, we do not have any reports, resolutions. Sorry.
All right. Any reports or communications from commissioners tonight? All right, Commissioner Kinsey, take it away.
All right, I wanted to report out at the, I think, helpful suggestion of something I read actually in the Bloomington Beacon, asking commissioners and members of council to actually offer reports about other meetings they attend to inform public view and to perhaps help amend and enhance the reporting that might not be available in our local papers. So I wanted to just comment for a moment about my representation at the BMC MPO, which is the Bloomington Monroe County Metropolitan Planning Organization. We had a meeting April 8th, and I just wanted to report out to the public and to everybody here that 2 items on the agenda I thought probably consumed the most of our attention at that meeting, and one has to do with the coordinated transportation plan update that is actually supported by INDOT, so Indiana Department of Transportation, that was offering some new information about rural transit and services for people with disabilities and the funds that were available for enhancing services. I thought that was a really important report that came out, and I was happy to at least see the objectives that were identified in that INDOT report. And that will be an ongoing project, and if anyone has any input on rural transit services or transportation for people with disabilities, I'd encourage you to have a look at the BMC MPO April 8th meeting, where there is a full report on this work. So that will be my report from the April 8th meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other reports from commissioners? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. As I mentioned, there's only one item on the consent agenda. For those of you who don't know what the consent agenda is, that's typically where we put things that are petitions that either fully meet the letter of the law or otherwise non-controversial, and we can adopt those without a full hearing. There's one item on there tonight, Lofton East 3rd LLC, the property at 2611 East 3rd Street. It's a request for a major site plan approval to allow for the reuse of a building for 11,000 square feet of commercial space and 30 dwelling units in the mixed-use corridor. Is there anyone who would like to see that petition removed from the consent agenda and receive a full hearing tonight? No? Okay. We will, I think we'll go to public comment. Looks like we have someone who would like to make public comment on the consent agenda. You go ahead, state your name for the record, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Greg Alexander. The Sahara Mart site there has a severe pedestrian access deficit. Its only access is by a sidewalk on 3rd Street, and that's been recognized as out of code because it's, 5 foot instead of 6 foot, but that's not actually the problem with it. The problem is 3rd Street. Drivers come in and out of that particular driveway at speed. They come in and out of Overhill at speed. They come out in and out of, Hillsdale at speed. They come out of all of those driveways and streets. They are moving as if they were on an INDOT road. They're often going 40 or 50 miles an hour parallel to that sidewalk. It's very uncomfortable. The sidewalk itself is absolute garbage. It's got, like by the fire station, it's got this severe grade, and it's absolutely unclear, like people are walking on the retaining wall because they can't figure out the sidewalk there. It is a really abysmal situation. And we're building so much on the east side. You guys have approved, about 1,000 bedrooms within about a half mile east of there, just in the last 2 years. And it needs to be a pedestrian environment. And so when new things go in, we have to ask that question, is there a bare minimum of pedestrian access here? And I think you have to acknowledge that the answer is no. And luckily, there's something very easy we can do. This property actually abuts onto Edwards Road, just behind it. And then they can use neighborhood streets. They don't have to walk, like Overhill has no sidewalk. They don't have to walk on the part of Overhill that's right by 3rd Street. They can walk on the part of Overhill that feels like a neighborhood road. And they could use neighborhood roads to get to the 7th Street Greenway, which we have invested some money in. They could use that to get people in the neighborhood who want to shop at the stores there. And right now it feels like trespassing. And there's some complicated little 1-foot strips of property and stuff, some stuff to sort out. But that needs to be opened up for bike and ped access, or this site simply won't have feasible bike and ped access, which is supposed to be one of our priorities in the comprehensive plan, the transportation plan, and the UDO. That's your responsibility. And kind of a more general comment, you guys need to be able to rely on planning. Planning needs to be able to rely on engineering. We need to actually, when there's a little bit like 5-foot strip of right-of-way that needs to be eminent domained, we need to just do that. We can't assume that just because it's pedestrian transportation that it's not worth doing eminent domain to attain some right-of-way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on the consent agenda this evening? All right, seeing none, we are back to the commission for any final comment or a motion on the consent agenda. Go ahead.
Mr. Gerlich, are you still on? And if you are, might you comment on Mr. Alexander's suggestion about an access from the other direction for that property? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I can certainly speak to that. So that connection actually was something that was heavily discussed back in 2005 when the Sahara Mart went in here, and there were mixed reactions from the neighborhood association of having that access between this site. There is another property that separates this site, Sahara Mart, from the Edward Street right-of-way. So there is another property that is not owned by the petitioners that separates us from the Edwards right-of-way. So we were always encouraging, and there was a neighborhood meeting that the petitioner had with this neighborhood, that they would continue to pursue that, but they have to work with that adjacent property owner in order to have that connection.
And if I may follow up, and that is unlikely to happen, or is it still in negotiations, or is there anything you can comment on that?
I can't say how those negotiations are. There is an impromptu connection through there, a worn path that has kind of just happened as people have used that connection opportunity. So there is a connection there, and the petitioners are not putting in anything that would prevent that. There is a dumpster as well as some concrete, but there is some landscaping that's proposed that we could possibly rearrange. But we can continue to work with the petitioner and the neighborhood association for what's comfortable for them. As I mentioned previously, the neighborhood association really had mixed reactions to trying to promote people walking through that street in their neighborhood to get there. So we were kind of proceeding cautiously with promoting that connection. And as I mentioned, it had some complexities as well with the fact that there's a different property owner that owns that actual land. But we can certainly still continue to work with the petitioner to see what might be possible with the permission of that adjacent property owner.
May I ask you to say what the objections were?
Basically just generating traffic through the neighborhood, the residents of the building. Neighborhoods generally try to be protective of their area and incorporating pedestrian connections that allows for other people that are on the site to kind of walk through there. Is not always the most positively received. But like I said, there is a separate property that we can't require, them to give access or give permission to move across their property.
Thank you for your response.
Mr. Whistler, if I could ask you quickly, we do want pedestrian connections, whether or not those who live on public roads want other people to be able to use those public facilities isn't the primary concern here. It's that, like Mr. Grulich said, there are other private property owners in between this property and Edwards, and there's nothing we can do to compel them to let us compel this property owner to put a path across their property. Thanks.
Right. Thank you. Any other comments or a motion regarding the consent agenda?
I'll motion to approve the consent agenda, but with a, there is a request for comment. Is it possible to turn on, do we lose the front monitors?
Apologies, we're not able to see what's happening on the screen unless we turn around, so it may just happen, may not be the last time we miss something that's going on the
Thanks for those of
online
you
version.
paying
Thank you.
attention.
Ah, there we
okay,
go.
Okay.
Oh,
Wait.
uh-oh, maybe not. We had it. While we're working on getting the visuals fixed up here, I'll just remind everyone how we're going to handle public comment. We will have a period of public comment on each petition, on each item before us tonight. If you'd like to make comment during that period, if you're on the online meeting, you'll need to raise your virtual hand, which is done by clicking on the reactions button and then raising your hand. I know it's possible to comment in the chat on the meeting at any time, but we obviously need to keep the meeting moving. And so if you would please, if you'd like to make comment, please try to raise that hand or post in the chat to be recognized during the comment period. Obviously, we didn't see this one, and we're still getting used to things here, so we will allow for an additional comment here out of order. But going forward, we'll need to keep it limited to the public comment period.
Okay,
Is there?
she should be able to comment at this point.
Are you able to unmute, Jackie? Do you have control?
Yes, she should be able to unmute at this point.
Okay, please go ahead and make your comment. State your name for the record, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hold on, she just muted herself. Just a sec. Unmute. You should be good to go. You're unmuted.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
We cannot hear you.
Oh dear.
Are you sure that your microphone works? It looks like you are unmuted, but we cannot hear you if you're speaking.
Okay, I think I have permission for it to use my microphone.
Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
So it appears
Okay,
this
I'm
is
so
a,
sorry. This is just going to be around and
a
around
facility
tonight.
problem here and not a
It's one
Zoom
of those days.
problem. Is that-
Okay, can you try again, Mary?
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, my name is Mary Rovat, Hrovat, and I live a few blocks from the property where the East Side Sahara Mart used to be. And I am in total agreement with everything Greg Alexander said about access via 3rd Street versus access via Edwards Row. And I agree that it does not, the people who live on that street, I don't have much interest in whether or not they want other people to walk on the street, but it would really mean a lot to me to be able to get in there to use whatever businesses are there, and also for people who live there to be able to get to 7th Street, to the 7th Street bike lane if they want to. So I just wanted to second everything about, that it would be much simpler for everybody involved in using that property if we could get there through Edwards Row rather than having to use 3rd Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's have one more last and final call for public comment on the consent agenda. If you are on the online meeting and you'd like to make comment, click the reactions button, and raise your hand.
See,
Oh.
we have no reactions, no chats.
All right. We are then back to the commission for any final comment or a motion on the consent agenda.
I'll motion to approve the consent agenda. While I'll just say I have reservations about the pedestrian access to this. I don't see a way that it's possible to do anything on this proposal at this stage and given the surrounding property. So I'll just motion approval for this property.
All right, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any final comment before we call the roll? All right, thank you. Darla, would you call the roll on that motion, please?
Okay. Seibor, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
and Cockrum.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, okay, the motion carries. The consent agenda is approved. We will now move on to petition DP 08-22, Walnut Pike Development LLC, property at 3111 South Walnut Street Pike. And Eric Grulich is the case manager, and I believe he's virtually here to present.
Yes, thank you, Brad. I'm sorry, Commissioner Whistler. This is a request from Walnut Pike Development for a property at 3111 South Walnut Street Pike. The property is zoned single-family residential, R2, and the petitioners are proposing to subdivide the property into 37 lots. This would consist of a series of single-family lots for sale as well as 4 common area lots. So this is on the far south side of town on Walnut Street Pike. The site has a long history within the planning department of subdivision approvals on the site. However, it continues to still sit empty and undeveloped. There are some single-family residences that are on 2 of the existing lots that would all be removed to allow for the overall subdivision of the site. So the petitioners are here to request the primary plat approval to allow for that 37 lot subdivision. They're also requesting to allow for the secondary plat to be delegated to staff, as well as a waiver of the required second hearing. And they're also requesting a waiver to vacate the previously recorded phase of this plat. And I'll go through that just a little bit when I get to that slide. As I mentioned, there were a series of approvals on this site, the last one happening in 2007, when the property was platted for the 12 or so lots that you currently see arranged on the GIS layout. The petitioners are requesting to vacate that plat so that the property can be replatted according to current regulations and meet all of our standards. So the location of those lot lines and right-of-way doesn't really work with the current UDO allowances and requirements for subdivisions. So they're requesting to vacate basically the plat east of Walnut Street Pike in order to allow for that to be replatted. So real quickly, I just want to point out while we're looking at the aerial photograph, you can certainly see the site in black. But one of the things that I wanted to point out here that is going to come into play with this petition is the existing developments surrounding this site. So you look to the north and the east, you see various phases of the Sherwood Oak subdivision that were all platted and developed. And there were no road stubs to this property that were constructed or required with that development. Likewise, to the south of this, this is a multifamily development that was approved and built. There were no road stubs that were placed to this property with that development either. So the majority of the surrounding developed property was built without connection opportunities to this site. So that's created a couple challenges on this site that I'll go over with the site plan. But this is the version, or this is the recorded plat that was recorded for a small portion of the western side of this. This allowed for 12 or so single-family lots and 1 common area lot. And so the petitioner is requesting to vacate this plat for everything east of Walnut Street Pike, as I mentioned, to allow for the site to be redeveloped. So the site has a mix of environmental features on it. There are several sinkholes that are scattered around the site, as well as the northern third of the property has a very dense mature tree canopy coverage along that site. So there are some environmental aspects of the UDO that come into play here with tree preservation, as well as karst conservancy, that all require things to be set aside on the proposed plat. So that is what they are doing. They are enacting the conservation subdivision type within the UDO, which requires a great deal of preservation to be set aside. The site plan that they are proposing does have 1 entrance on Walnut Street Pike that does result in a cul-de-sac being created on the east half of the property. So the cul-de-sac is a result of the lack of connection opportunities that were presented on the adjacent properties that I pointed out when we were looking at that aerial photograph. The property to the north of this does have a single-family home on it that is very likely to be redeveloped at some point in the coming decades. So in order to promote connectivity and fix some of the errors that would have happened in the past with developments that don't stub to adjacent properties to allow for future connection, the petitioner is proposing a road stub to the property to the north in order to allow for that connectivity to continue through that property and connect out to Walnut Street Pike. So the proposed subdivision, there would be basically 2 roads proposed internally. These would both be public, dedicated with 61 feet of right-of-way. The petitioner is proposing to have on-street parking along the south side of the internal road. They are setting aside a great deal amount of the property in the common area. The UDO requires common area for karst features over a half acre to be set aside in common area, as well as tree preservation areas are required to be set aside in common area once they get over a certain size as well. So lots 9 and 10 would be platted with a conservation easement for the areas of tree preservation with karst conservancy easements for all of the karst features that are on those site. Likewise on lot 26 on the south side of the site, that would be a large common area lot. And then lot 37 would be another common area lot that would primarily serve as detention, but also does have a karst feature on it as well. So the conservation subdivision type that is being proposed here really is the most appropriate given the environmental constraints on the site, which make a traditional subdivision type where you would see alley loaded lots and a different internal connection road layout, just not possible. The location of the karst features really creates a lot of difficulty with arranging lots with alleys and having any kind of internal access loop that would allow for the cul-de-sac to not be incorporated with this site. And as I mentioned previously, you know, the lack of connection opportunities on the properties that surround this really necessitate the cul-de-sac. So the Unified Development Ordinance does not allow for cul-de-sacs. So the petitioner is requesting a waiver to allow for the cul-de-sac with this development for the reasons that I just kind of enumerated there. So with that, as I mentioned, the petitioner is requesting a series of waivers with this. They are requesting that the required second hearing be waived. The petitioner has given us a full set of site and grading and utility plans, as well as a primary plat that meets all of the UDO requirements, with the exception of the waiver that is being requested for the cul-de-sac. So the property or the petition is very well planned out in terms of design plans. So the waiver of the required hearing does not seem necessary, as we have all of the information presented to us tonight that we need in order to analyze the site plan and the plat. So the petitioner is also requesting to delegate secondary plat approval to staff. Again, they have clearly laid out a primary plat that meets all of the UDO requirements, as well as site grading and utility plans to give us a great idea of what will be involved with the plat. So we have not and are not expecting any changes really with the secondary plat versus the primary plat. So we do not have any issues with delegating the secondary plat to staff for approval. They are requesting a waiver, they're requesting to vacate the previous plat for those lots that I showed on the west side of the site. So we are requesting or recommending that the Planning Commission approve that vacation of the plat. And I've added a seventh condition just to clarify the vacation of the plat only applies to what was platted east of Walnut Street Pike. So the right-of-way that was dedicated for Walnut Street Pike would remain, and only the plat that was platted for the property east of Walnut Street Pike will be vacated. And then we are also recommending a waiver to allow the cul-de-sac, again, for the reasons that I've highlighted. And overall, we are recommending approval and recommend that the Planning Commission adopt the proposed findings with the 6 conditions that were listed in staff's report, plus the 7th condition that I have on the screen in a kind of outline. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Grulich. Is there a representative of the petitioner who would like to add anything to the presentation?
You should be good, Mr. Riggert.
All right. Hi, I'm Bill Riggert with Bledsoe Riggert Cooper James, here this evening to represent Walnut Pike Development on the Ivy Chase subdivision case. Good evening, commissioners. I believe Eric did a wonderful job presenting our proposal, and I really have nothing more to add to it, and I am here to answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners, either for staff or for the petitioner? Commissioner Cochran, go ahead.
So the conservation easements, if I said it correctly, is that correct, conservation easement? Eric?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So lot 9 and 10, can you further explain? I thought I heard you say future development. Can you explain what that's going to do to this property? And is there going to be potential future development that could happen on these 2 lots?
No, so lots 9 and 10 are set aside as common area. They would be specifically labeled on the secondary plat as non-buildable lots. So all of the common area lots, lots 9, lots 10, 26, and 37 are common area lots that would not be buildable.
Thank you. And I brought this up prior, but I just wanted to indicate that this area where we were looking at petition on the county side, a sinkhole did open during construction. So I just wanted to echo that to staff if they don't have any provisions of what to do if a sinkhole does open during construction, how to proceed. So I encourage you reach out to our MS4 coordinator. We put some provisions in place to deal with this. So just wanted to echo that concern.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
I'd like to know why the stub road is put in there. If 9 and 10 are, continuous, then it preserves the karst topography and the features there. It also protects the tree canopy. So I'm wondering why there's a stub road there. And I ask it for 2 questions. One, because I look at it and that question comes up naturally to preserve those features. And we have a couple members of the public today who owns that property to the north, and they're concerned about safety aspects of having a dead-end road at the back of their property. So if Mr. Gerlich or whoever wants to comment on that, maybe can kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned at the beginning part of the presentation, this site is a victim of previous planning decisions that resulted in a lack of road stubs that gave connection opportunities. So our transportation plan has many sections that deal with promoting connectivity between properties, both for vehicles and pedestrians. This lack of connectivity is what results in a cul-de-sac being created on this site here. So we're trying to fix a lot of the mistakes that have happened in the past by not requiring those connections. Having more than one opportunity and connection into and out of a property is advantageous for a lot of reasons. It takes the traffic burden off of the major roads. It gives emergency services additional ways to get into and out of sites. It allows for people that located within this development to visit other people that are on the adjacent property without having to go on Walnut Street Pike, so that relieves the traffic burden on that road. So requiring this stub to the north gives better connection opportunities for this property as well as the property to the north for when that most likely will redevelop. So they've located the road stub away from karst features, so there's no impact to that, and they've placed that at a location that gives the best kind of chances for the development of the property to the north. They still have some lots to the east of the road, as well as developable area within the center of the site. So we've located the stub kind of in the most appropriate location, given the environmental constraints, the topography, as well as, possible lot arrangements for the lot to the north.
So if I may follow up, so there's no karst topography under the stub?
No, nothing has been identified. You can see on the plat here, you can see the karst feature just to the west of that. It's located east of lot 8. So it's a good deal away from that karst feature.
And again, the rationale for putting the stub there is for, what if the property is never sold and subdivided north of that? Is there really a reason? Is there a middle ground that can be proposed so that it is not an asphalt paved stub road?
Yep. So with the subdivision and with the plat, they are required to dedicate right-of-way and then build all public improvements within the right-of-way. So they would be required to build that road and stub it to the north property line with this plat. So they would have to stub it to the north property line so that when that property to the north develops, they can connect to that stub most easily.
I understand that. I guess in this case that, I don't think I can support the proposal without some kind of condition on that stub road. I don't really think I understand why it needs to be there at this point. At some point in the future, maybe it'll need to be there, but right now I just can't see it.
Yeah, there's not really a way for us to come back and retroactively acquire that right-of-way. The petitioner owns all the site now, and then this would be sold to individual property owners. And then, the petitioner, the developers, is essentially done. So, we can't really come back and acquire that right-of-way from private property owners in that time and then expect them to, build the road. That's obviously the requirement of the petitioner to carry forward what is required with the plat, build those improvements to our standards.
No one would own that stub road, though, if it wasn't developed, correct? Because it appears to me that it looks like it's not platted for a home.
So lot 11 is adjacent to that road stub, and it's certainly possible that they might use that for a driveway and a connection. But no, the people within this development, other than lot 11, would not be using that road unless they were visiting, obviously, people to the north of this. This obviously also works as pedestrian connectivity as well as bicycles. So it would be used for that property to the north. Certainly what we've seen, as you sit on the Plan Commission and in this job long enough, properties will develop. This property here has sat here for a long time and is developing now. We obviously have to plan for the future. If we don't put in these road connections and stubs now, then we're going to be living with those mistakes when we look at that property to the north, whatever time period from now that develops. And so we have to get those connections now.
Okay, thank you for your response.
Mr. Whistler, if I may ask, well, I don't know if I identified myself earlier, sorry, Jackie Scanlon, Development Services Manager. This is a code requirement. It's been a code requirement for decades, I'd say, at least since 2007. If it's included because it's required and it's good policy to try to get connections that aren't just major roads. And as Eric said, this is the time to get that. We won't necessarily be able to come back and do that. Coles to SAC long-term present maintenance issues for the city. So putting them all over town is something we have decided as a community we want to stop doing. And so one way to do that is to allow connectivity. So yes, there is not an adjacent development coming in right now, but if one comes in the future, then we will have this built in and ready to go. So that's part of the reason why we include those. So I just wanted to echo that from Eric, and also to say that is what code says now. So if that's something that this body or any member of this body or any other body that's able to propose UDO changes wants to address, that's possible. But it is a requirement, and that's why they've included it. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional questions from commissioners? Commissioner Kinsey.
Since we're on this road stub, I do have an additional question, just to clarify that as it looks right now, that stub, and I completely understand that it is code required and does promote connectivity, it would, at this point, the only way it could allow a user to access anything would be, again, to Walnut Street Pike. Is that correct, as the only other connector? I mean, yes, it would connect to the adjacent property, but other than that, then that would still route traffic or any pedestrians back to Walnut Street Pike. There are no other options, right?
Correct, yes. Due to lack of connectivity on adjacent properties, this property here does not have opportunities to connect to anything else. So this stub here would circle through the property to the north and then go out to Walnut Street Pike.
Thank you for that clarification. And the other question I have is, just to clarify, this is purely for clarification. On the map that's in the packet, the plat that is being vacated is currently outlined in the neon green that includes another cul-de-sac. That's what it's just immediately east of Walnut Street. Yeah, right there. It's that obviously platted space right east of Walnut Street Pike.
Yes, so that cul-de-sac that was shown, so the previous overall plat for this development had a couple cul-de-sacs that were shown on that. So we're fixing a lot of those mistakes as well by only having, the one small portion of this property that have a cul-de-sac. I think it's also significant to show or state that there are several developments throughout Bloomington that have road stubs that connect to adjacent undeveloped properties. So this is not uncommon. This is something that we see very often as properties develop and that are adjacent to undeveloped properties, or that certainly have a high chance of being redeveloped at some point in the future, to require those road stubs so that we do get those connections. And that has resulted in roads extending through those properties when they develop. So, this is not just a theoretical exercise that really never comes to fruition. This does actually work and is a good idea.
Thanks, Eric. And just to reiterate this, so the elimination of that plat, or the vacation of that plat, will correct a cul-de-sac that was part of the previous platted space that we want to definitely eliminate.
Correct.
That's the point of the condition number 7.
Yes, so condition 7 allows for the plat to be vacated for everything east of Walnut Street Pike, but preserves the right-of-way that was dedicated along Walnut Street Pike.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, again, if I may add, it's the second thing he said is the answer to your question. The condition number 7 specifically is addressing the portion of right-of-way, or the portion of the previous plat, the dedicated right-of-way over Walnut Street Pike. So from the center of Walnut Street Pike east, roughly 40 feet, we don't want to vacate that. We want that to remain. So everything from the existing interface between that right-of-way line and this property, everything east, so all the lots and the little cul-de-sac that was platted as part of Phase 1, all that comes up.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Seabour.
Thanks. Maybe just to follow up, and I appreciate the new condition number 7. For everybody's clarity, I think the previous secondary plat or final plat dedicated 40 feet of right-of-way along Walnut Street Pike that didn't previously exist. And I think what I'm hearing, staff, and just maybe to confirm, I think the language is the intent is to maintain that right-of-way that was previously established and vacate everything to the east of that. And so as long as that's clear, and I just wanted, I guess, to verify that for our memory.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Seaboard.
Cool. And then my other question is maybe more towards the petitioner. Just curious about timing. Just knowing that a previous plat was approved some time ago and is sat. Just curious if you can provide any insights on when this project might move forward to the next stage.
Yes, Commissioner. Bill Riggert again. On behalf of Walnut Pike Development, I believe they are anxious to get this project started. And once it's started, they will continue until it's complete. It's a completely different set of developers than the previous property owner. So my guess is they'll, as quickly as we can get permits from IDEM and so forth, CBU, they'll commence construction immediately.
That sounds great, and I think I saw or read somewhere that it'll likely be done in one phase as well. Can you confirm that that's the intent as well?
Yes, that would be the intent. Yes, one single phase to get all the infrastructure in place, and then start with the single family lots.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any additional questions from commissioners? Anyone else down here before we go to a second bite? Go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
What's to prevent a car going directly into the property owner's backyard? What would prevent that? And I'm not an engineer, so I'm just kind of asking, being a devil's advocate here.
Yeah, so there is a sign that is required to be posted at the end of that stub street saying that it would be extended in the future. So that would obviously be one physical impediment. Not to mention, the stand of trees that's right at the end of that road stub as well, that's on the adjacent property.
Looks like the trees are going to be taken out there, Mr. Gerlich.
Not on the neighbor's property.
All right, I have one more question to the president. Can we add conditions on at this point?
Yeah, I believe that that's within our purview. I would.
Can we add a condition that the stub road not be developed into a stub road?
Well, I don't believe we could do that as a condition because that is the rule, that is the law, that it has to be developed, so we would have to include that as a waiver, I suppose.
Correct.
But yes, I believe we would be able to amend this to include an additional waiver.
I believe that's accurate, yes. Yeah, that's right.
Well, then I would propose that.
Okay. I don't think it's a good idea for us to try to do that on the fly here. If we want to do that, I think we need to put that in writing.
And have legal crafted for us?
And yes, that would be my recommendation. I mean, I don't think there's anything prevents us from doing it, but I think it's a lot safer if we do put that in
Sure.
writing and make sure
I would agree with you, and thank you
it's
for
worded
that.
carefully. So I think procedurally, if that's what you want to do,
Yes.
my recommendation, and of course, anybody can make a motion to do whatever they like. My recommendation would be that we have a second hearing on this, ask legal to craft that between now and the second hearing, if that's the way you want to proceed.
Very good. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Burrell, go ahead.
This is a requirement, so if it's not built by this developer at this point, the developer will move on. Who's going to build it in the future? You can't, are you going to require the developer to build this stub later when another, or are you going to require the next developer to do it, but then it's not their property? It puts us in a very awkward situation if there's going to be a stub because it's a requirement, but then how do we set conditions on when this is going to be built? And there's also bond money that goes with the stub, so you're going to have the developer hanging in there for years. And as you know, businesses sometimes get dissolved. So then if it's dissolved, who's responsible for this? Is it going to be the city down the road? Is it going to be the owners of the property? You know, I mean, those are my questions. I mean, it creates, now, I think Eric said, you know, there can be signage, there can be some impediment at the end of the stub. Of course, if somebody drives into the neighbor property, they're going to drive into a tree. So I don't know, there's just, I have a lot of questions when we decide to change what is a requirement because the neighbor is concerned, or impose some sort of change there by public opinion. I don't know. Those are my concerns. Thank you.
Is that a question you would like a response from staff on?
Actually, yes.
Okay.
If they've seen any cases in the situation, how it was handled, that would be great.
Yep, so the Unified Development Ordinance does have language for bonds, for public improvement bonds, and has a 3-year time limit on them. So after that time limit is up, we are supposed to call in the bond and build whatever public improvements are bonded for, so that we're not continuing to holding on to a bond. You know, a bond is obviously a letter of credit from the developer and is tying up their money in perpetuity. So that is why we have very specific time limits for these public improvement bonds. So they would have to build the road or bond for it, but after that 3 years, we would have the ability and should be calling it in. And the UDO says that, you know, that 3-year time limit is there for a reason. So we would have to call it in after that 3 years.
I'll add to that as well. Yeah, we've had this conversation internally as well. I mean, there are some concerns with stub streets. They don't lead anywhere right now. Well, you know, who's maintaining them, who's snow removal, those types of things. So we have had internal discussions about that. But the questions the Commissioner Burrell raises are great questions, and this is what I think got us as a city and then us now, a staff now, to the point where the UDO is now, where, yeah, how do we compel these connections if we're not doing it right now when they're platting? How do we come back to this developer later, or whoever they've sold it to in 5 years, when the property owner to the north decides, oh, wait, I think we actually do want to develop. Okay, you can connect now, and compel them to put something in when they're not seeking an approval at that time. We are not sure, we don't think that's possible. So if we want those connections later in the future, we'll be paying for them. The taxpayers will be paying for those. When we could be getting them now and having the developer pay for that, put in those initial improvements. So that's why it's written that way. They're the ones getting the lion's share of the benefit of this development, and so they need to be putting in as well for public benefit. And per the UDO and many of our adopted plans and documents, connectivity is right up there at the top of things that we're interested in, and this is how we get it.
Thank you. Commissioner Burrell, does that answer your questions?
Yeah, it confirms what I was thinking. So if we're going to do a waiver, I mean, it's more involved than just, there's much more involved to this than just something that would make a neighbor, calm their fears. And I understand the fears as well. So anyway, it's something to really put some thought into it. I don't think it's something that we could do it lightly.
All right. I might follow up on that just for staff. Can you recall a case where Plan Commission added a waiver that wasn't requested by the petitioner? Is there any precedent for that?
No, off the top of my head, I cannot. We don't do, as many subdivisions as maybe we used to in the past, which is the only situation in which you guys can do waivers at this point. We don't do the downtown development waivers anymore. Eric, can you think of something?
No, I cannot think of anything where we've added a waiver that was not requested by the petitioner.
All right. Any other questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Cochran.
So Eric, I'd like to hear from the developer, because I agree with Commissioner Smith on building this road, and we see them quite often, and I know they're a part of the code, but what's the developer's point of view? Would they like to have potential development north of this site, or would they rather not build this road? Just out of curiosity.
Hi, it's Bill Riggert, if I'm allowed to speak. Also, Matt is on, he's got his hand raised. He too might have, there's Matthew Crouch. Again, he may have a comment as well. When we first presented our petition to city planning, we did not want to put the stub in. And we wanted to keep it simple to the development itself. And then Eric pointed out all the problems in the past about connectivity with adjacent properties. And then it was at that point, plus it's in the UDO, we added the stub to the north for future development. It would be great if we wouldn't have to do it. It's an added cost to this development, both the road and we do have infrastructure dealing with CBU. We have to stub a water main to the property line, but that can be dealt with along Walnut Street Pike where we're extending a water main up Walnut Street Pike as well. So if we didn't have to do it, it would be great. And we would have asked for a waiver if it was something that we felt staff would have supported. I'd invite Jackie to unmute Matt Crouch so he can add a little bit as well, if possible.
Should be good to go.
This is Matt Crouch with Walnut Pike Development. I agree with everything that Bill said. It is not something that we wanted to do, but we realized that we would not get the support of the planning staff. So we went forward with what we've proposed today.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Enright.
I think there's one other component to this that hasn't really been brought up, and that's the safety component. To have 2 points of ingress and egress is very beneficial especially, if one of the first couple addresses, had a situation where we need first responders, a fire truck and stuff, and then everyone else is bottlenecked into there. So I think a safety standpoint is very important with the 2 points of ingress and egress. Also, just being very familiar with this area, it's just kind of a couple blocks down to the municipal boundary to where you get to the county. And yeah, it's in dire need of connectivity. I understand the financial impact it could have on the petitioner, but then who's going to blunt that cost when it's needed? Also, it's really important to maintain these connection points, because if you give them up, then you're looking at very few options, and pretty much the options none of us want to bring up, like eminent domain and things of that nature. So it's an interesting area, and also I think Walnut Street Pike right there is kind of has a decent slope to it. So I think if the site to the north ever is developed, it'd be nice to have two ways to getting in and out, just for a number of safety components. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? I've got one more. If Eric, would you mind sharing your screen and showing the map that includes the surrounding properties? Yeah, this is fine. So there was a question earlier about what it connects to, and I think it was said that it would only really be able to connect back to Walnut Street Pike. But I just wanted to clarify, you've got to the north, South Souter Square with a couple of cul-de-sacs there. You've got to the east, Jennifer Drive, where there's a cul-de-sac. If any of those areas were to be redeveloped, would those also be required then to stub into this property?
Given that it would be stubbing into common area that isn't developable, I would say no. We would not require them to stub into common space that has a conservation easement on it. No.
Even if it could connect through the adjacent property to the north. I mean, I'm just looking at this map thinking, if this site connected to Jennifer Drive or to Souter Square, you could travel all the way to Winslow or all the way to Sherwood Oaks Park without having to touch Walnut Street Pike.
Absolutely, and that would be ideal. And that is a great example of mistakes in the past and missed connection opportunities that now you look at a map and say, why didn't this happen? This could have easily been done and given us a lot better connectivity north to south, east to west. So certainly that is possible, if the lot to the north of this redevelops, that we might require some kind of a stub or maybe pedestrian connection to some of these adjacent properties. As well as the properties to the south or east, there could be some pedestrian connection opportunities there. But no, as you certainly pointed out here, the missed connection opportunities that we missed in the past are biting us today. And so that's why it is so important to get these connections now and plan for the future.
Yeah, it does sound to me like there's some discretion, though. It's not absolutely black and white that, every one of these properties has to stub to the next. Can you maybe just give a little bit more context on what triggers the requirement?
Yeah, so absolutely. So certainly any roads that are shown on the transportation plan, that have general layouts of the major thoroughfares through town, especially as those go through undeveloped properties, those are new roads that have to be constructed. Oftentimes we look at properties and, we know that something is going to be redeveloped in the future. We make those appropriate connections. So if I can, I think I'll just kind of give a little bit of an example and find a great picture of that, which is with the Huntington Farm over on the east side of town. So that is a large property that is currently vacant. However, there were lots of developments that happened just adjacent to that, that we installed these road stubs on in order to allow for lots to happen within there. So you have the Gentry Subdivision just to the north. We made Romans Way stub into that. You've got Mary Beth Drive that stubs into this property as well as you've got the Cricket Knoll development that stubs into this property. So the transportation plan doesn't show every single local road. You know, that is going to be based on best management practices when petitions come forward for development. So you look at adjacent properties, especially if it's, you know, very undeveloped or, you know, underdeveloped, high likelihood it's going to be redeveloped. You have to make those connection opportunities now so that you get those connections through the property when it happens. So, you know, this right here is a great example of road stubs that were required with those connections. There are signs at the end of Romans Way and Mary Beth Drive that say they will be connected. And those opportunities are right there ready to go when something happens here. It might be 50 years, it might be 100 years, but it more than likely is going to happen. You know, as you look around here, you know, you see that things just get picked over again. So there will be those decisions and those will be opportunities in the future. And like I said, and we'll just keep saying, you know, you have to plan for it now. You know, that is one of the basic fundamental principles of planning is plan for the future and get those opportunities. Connectivity is important for so many reasons. You know, not just people driving, emergency services, people walking, all kinds of benefits to connectivity. And that's why it's really important to have this connection with this petition and have that constructed now.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from commissioners? Okay, we will then go to public comment. If you are here to make public comment, please make your way to the podium, state your name for the record. You'll have 5 minutes. If you are online and would like to make comment, please click on that reactions button and click on the raise hand tab. We will try to recognize you in the order in which your hand was raised, but please bear with us. This is a little tricky to coordinate both live and online participants here, but we will make sure that everyone has a chance to comment. So we'll start with our live and in-person commenters. Please state your name and you'll have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ben Ramsden. My spouse, Anna Puce, and I are the co-owners of 3051 South Walnut Street Pike, which is immediately north of the platting petitioned property we're talking about tonight. And we've lived there for 13 years, almost 13 years. We do thank the Commissioners for this opportunity to present our thoughts about this development. We do certainly strongly object to the inclusion of the northward-directed road stub in the petition plan. And as we've seen, this proposed stub would terminate directly on our property, which is a 4-acre block approximately. We do contend that this road stub really is not necessary in this location. First, there are a couple of things we do want to mention briefly. First, we were rather surprised that the online planning document stated, and I quote here, "There is an undeveloped property to the north that the petitioner is providing a road stub to in order to allow for expanded access through that property when it redevelops," end of quote. Commissioners, regarding this, we feel a false statement that our property is undeveloped. It has already been developed, in fact, for over 100 years. It's absolutely not an undeveloped tract that deserves this kind of expected development in the immediate future. May we actually pass a few pictures of our property and yard for the Commissioners, just so you get a sense of what's really there. When we look at the aerial view before, it just looks like a bunch of trees and, you know, not much there. Is that possible that we can just pass that through? There's some copies there. Thank you. If you get a chance to see these pictures, it's just a small sample. We live in a 1921 Art Deco style home that's been extensively renovated, including a high-quality addition, custom addition, with major landscaping by the previous owners. We actually purchased it for almost $500,000 in 2009, and we've continued to make enhancements. Our house, honestly, is in excellent shape and certainly not about to be needing to be demolished or abandoned. We also have very developed land. Developed land includes extensive landscaping with established flower beds and trees and organic veggie garden, irrigation, garage shed, etc. We also have maintained and preserved some woodlands that provide edible fungi, bird watching, shelter to our native animals. There's also a mini karst, limestone karst, pardon my accent, features on the property that really does need to be left alone, and this tends to disallow roads and other new structures in the vicinity. And these are just a few reasons why we think our very attractive, I guess I'm a bit biased because I'm the resident there, but attractive and very developed, not undeveloped property, and this I would expect would remain intact given its value, and historic value as well, will remain intact for many decades to come and beyond, and we see no reason why a road stub would make practical sense in this location because of that. And by the way, commissioners are most welcome to drop by our home to see the real context of this location. A couple of other quick things. We were also really surprised, extremely surprised to read in the planning document that adjacent property owners had been consulted and had reported, quote, no major concerns, end of quote. We were sent a letter about tonight's hearing, which is due process, but all immediate neighbours and us were never directly notified about an information meeting in February. If we had been appropriately contacted by mail, we would certainly have attended, but we never knew about that. There have been a few other procedural problems as well. For example, notification of the hearing was mistakenly sent to, not our address, but 3051 Walnut Springs Pike. I'm not quite sure where that is in town, by Bledsoe, Riggett, Cooper, James. That is not our address. We are not against neighbouring developments in principle, absolutely, and in fact we're 100% advocates of neighbourhood diversity, and we think indeed maintaining our premium and historic property intact without subdivision nor demolition, and with keeping it with other nearby homes of diverse ages and valuations would in fact keep the broad mosaic that the city has championed and which we support. As previously mentioned, we do agree that even if a connecting road could ever be completed, it seems highly unlikely to us it would not improve any connectivity, cross-community connectivity, pedestrian flow, or cross-community vehicle flow. The stub road could only ever feed traffic, as was mentioned, back to the same road already used egress for the development. So just to quickly finish up, and thank you for your time. Finally, we are concerned the road stub would adversely impact appraisals and sales of our and other closed property. Is this stub inclusion really consistent with the UDO's principle of property value protections?
Thank you.
In sum, we respectfully ask that the commissioners do withhold the road stub component, or at the very minimum, maintain an undeveloped easement for future road connection, if and when that unlikely option ever eventuated.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you for your time.
Hi, I'm Greg Alexander again. I'm really glad to see this body and also city staff is concerned about connectivity. It is the defining problem of the south side and the east side and the west side and the north side of Bloomington. Frankly, this body dropped the ball for 50 consecutive years, and now we're dealing with this problem. It truly is a generational problem. You know, I grew up in a trailer park, and it was segregated by transportation. You know, they didn't want poor trailer park people going in the suburbs, and they also didn't want the industrial use that actually bordered the trailer park to influence us, and so we were totally segregated by transportation. We had to go by highway. I lived in Westbrook Downs, and everybody that I knew lived in Forest Park, and so to get from Westbrook Downs to Forest Park, it's about 800 feet, you know, it's nothing, a kid can walk it. It's about going on a mile on a highway to actually make that trip. So that's a kind of segregation that I grew up with. I was born in 1980. This mistake that was made consecutively every year until about 5 years ago, even in this city, has defined my life, defined where I want to live, and defined how I have gotten around. It's defined transportation. It's defined, you know, I came from a family that didn't have 3 or 4 cars for 3 or 4 members. And so that defined my life in high school. And it will define the lives of the kids who live in these, 30-some houses. And they are going to have friends who are going to live in Sherwood Oaks. They're going to go to South High School. They're going to go to the same schools. They're going to go to the same daycare, same church. They're going to know these kids. And the only way they're going to be able to visit them, even though Sherwood Oaks is directly at the proposed cul-de-sac here, is to go on Walnut Street Pike and then go on Morris Pike, Gordon Pike, all that kind of crap. And it's going to be awful. They're never going to do it without adult supervision. It's going to take an adult half an hour out of their life just to ferry kids to the neighbor's house. And we can avoid that. I want to push back on the staff suggestion that eminent domain is impossible. It's impossible without support from engineering. It's impossible without support from city legal, but it is eminently possible. 3 houses down from my house, there's a lot. It's a partial lot. It's an abandoned lot. It's owned by the City of Bloomington Redevelopment Commission. They don't clear the sidewalk. It's the worst lot on my block in terms of maintaining their sidewalk, their vegetation, and so on. And it was created because they wanted to build a bridge, the railroad bridge connects Rogers to Madison to Kinzer Pike. And without that bridge, there were serious problems developing the north side of Bloomington where North High School is. And that was all built late 70s. And by the time the 80s rolled around, they realized they had to make another road connection, or this property wouldn't be as valuable. The problems with it wouldn't be solvable. And so just as a convenience for greater transportation ease for people that were already dedicated to the car, they destroyed a house and created a vacant lot on my street. So we can do that. We can do that for cars. So what you need to do is the cul-de-sac is illegal. You can't approve another cul-de-sac. You shouldn't do that. We have had planning documents, and now the UDO formally says we cannot approve cul-de-sacs. Don't approve a cul-de-sac. And you can extend past the end of that. You can use just the tiniest amount of right-of-way. You can, between 1012 and 1016 Jennifer Drive, there's a 20-foot gap. Run a 6-foot pedestrian path through that. We've done that before in this town even. And then that would connect to the end of the cul-de-sac. And then it wouldn't be a dead end. And all the kids that live in Sherwood Oaks would be able to meet the kids that live in this new neighborhood. That is so essential. If you look at the south side of Bloomington, everybody that lives there will drive for everything. Even to go to the Kroger that's a third of the mile south, they will drive. They will drive for everything because there's no connectivity. There are no sidewalks. You could build so many sidewalks on Walnut Street Pike and we would still be short sidewalks. It is such a lousy pedestrian environment, and we can simply solve that by following our own rules that say we do not approve cul-de-sacs. And we have to put the force of eminent domain behind that, or we simply can't achieve this goal. And if we don't achieve this goal, we will just be making more segregated car-dependent neighborhoods, which this city has again and again, both formally and as aspirations, said we will not do. No more cul-de-sacs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe that is all of our in-person. Oh, maybe one more.
I just need 30 seconds. I
Please
saw a comment.
State your name for the record,
please. Oh, thank
please.
you. Ina Puce, and I, the spouse of Ben Ramsden. I just wanted to make a comment about that comment in the chat about the developer not knowing that there was a house on that north side, but that didn't stop you from sending us a letter asking to buy the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any hands raised for online comment?
We do. Oh, sorry. Greg's time. Let's see. Matt's iPhone, I think, is different than the petitioner. Should be able to unmute.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, please state your name.
Hi, this is Matt Lewis. I actually live at an adjacent property on the backside of the proposed development. I want to make a few comments as well as a couple of concerns I have. First, as far as connecting in through the adjacent property and safety, what wasn't mentioned with the multiple times that this property is tried to be developed is that there were also multiple attempts to develop this property that were denied by the Planning Commission for multifamily residents due to safety concerns, because there is one method of egress from this property. As they said, if there's something that happens in here, you're going to clog that single artery and lock everybody out or lock everybody in. Second, with that cul-de-sac, at the very end of the property, I heard concerns a little bit ago of somebody driving down the spur road into the back of a property. That cul-de-sac ends in my neighbor's backyard. If somebody misses the brakes, they're driving into my neighbor's yard, possibly mine, I suppose, too, if they're at the right angle, as well as people parking their cars, in essence, 20 feet from our backyard, which really, that's not a frontage side, that's the rear side. Usually we've got, houses backed up to that, so that we have backyard to backyard, not somebody driving cars 20 feet from where my kids could be playing. So I have a concern with that. Also with the adjacent property, if you very quickly just even look at the width of that property, knowing what you know about the UDO and anything with the stand of trees that is very clearly shown on Google Maps or on the GIS, that it would be incredibly difficult to actually develop that property, put a road in there, and still have room to put additional plats in based on Area 6 and anything else that would be locked out due to the rules in the UDO. It just seems like it could be a problem there. So I guess there's a few things. One, the cul-de-sac being so close and pushing right into mine and my neighbor's backyards, and the addition of that spur road that seems highly unlikely to be developed unless you see a full development of this whole entire property, all the properties around, which if you look on the GIS, Jeffrey Jones, the current owner of these properties, was the property owner when all of this area was developed. He declined to develop it with this property. I suppose I don't know what happened back in the 90s when the original development was done, but I have to question why there were no spurs put in. There were spurs put in other spots inside of this development when it was put up. Why weren't those put here? Why was there no push to develop other than the current property owner had other plans? So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We have one more. Ms. Stedman?
Yes, actually, this is Mary Ellen McCann. There are several of us at Rosie's. And I have a comment and a question. The comment being, I agree with the gentleman who took exception to the minutes saying that there were no particular issues stated in the last. People from Peppergrass have been involved and have shared concerns. So I just want to support what that gentleman said earlier. My question for the petitioners, if you could put the diagram back up of the development that shows the 37 lots and then the surrounding properties, I would appreciate it. So my question for the petitioners is, what consideration or what will be done in terms of potential runoff, drainage, not only ongoing, but especially during a construction, because we are to the south. The first one you just popped up that shows all that one more there, that one. Oops, yes. Go back one, please. you can see the pepper grass on the, yes, that one. In terms of drainage, runoff, especially during construction, and will there be any kind of buffer zone? And if so, in what manner between the south side of this area and, well, speaking personally from Peppergrass, you can see my name there on there. I will butt right up to it. So, and that property is higher than our property. So if the petitioners could speak to that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional public comments?
Well, she said there were a few there. So I don't know if there's anyone else planning to use this microphone.
No, I think they nominated me.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Rosie has a question.
I know we're talking about inside the development right now, but one of my concerns besides...
We're not able to hear you very clearly.
Yeah, we can't hear you. You'll have to be closer to the microphone, I think.
Yeah, and please state your name for the record and then make your comment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my name's Rosie Stedman, and I live in Peppergrass. I am concerned about the drainage, and I was on Zoom meeting during neighborhood meeting, and I thought Mr. Rigger handled it well. But besides that, I think he stated that Bloomington doesn't require an acceleration, deceleration zones when turning into like Peppergrass has. A wide street where if somebody's coming up on you 90 miles an hour on Walnut Street Pike, you can get over and turn into Peppergrass easily. I think you're going to need that there because people drive like a bat out of hell on Walnut Street Pike. So that is a concern of mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional public comments? Jackie, are there any more hands raised?
I went ahead and muted them and put their hand down, so if anyone else there, they'll need to re-raise, but otherwise we don't have anything or any comments.
All right. Last call for public comment. Just one more time, click the reactions button, click the raise hand button, or send a chat message to signify that you'd like to comment. We'll give just one more moment here to make sure we gave everyone a chance. Okay, we are now back to the commission for any additional questions, comments, or a motion. Commissioner Kinsey.
I hope the staff and perhaps the petitioner can address the few questions that we heard raised by the public who commented on this property. And just to raise a few of them, one, I wonder if we could address the Matt Lewis question about the cul-de-sac and its location up against the developments to the east. That's one question. The second question, I think, is about the runoff and expectations or plans for addressing runoff during the construction nearest to the Peppergrass development. And then I think the third question is about road safety on Walnut Street Pike. If those three, at least those are the three direct questions I heard addressed by public comment that I'd appreciate some responses to, please.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll attempt to address each of those three, and then the petitioner can certainly chime in if I'm missing anything. So in terms of the safety at the end of the cul-de-sac, it will have a standing curb around it, as well as a sidewalk and tree plot along there. We can certainly work with the petitioner to place any other physical impediments that might be necessary. There is a utility easement that runs to the end of that cul-de-sac that will have a sewer line, so we have to be somewhat careful of any major physical impediments that we would put to prevent a car. But we can certainly work with the engineering department and the petitioner to try to address any safety concerns that we might be able to incorporate for the end of that cul-de-sac. In terms of the runoff, this site drains from north to south. And so right now in its current state, the runoff just happens, unobstructed. So with this petition, they would be installing this road through the center of the site that would have curb inlets in that would capture all the stormwater and divert that to the west. So a great deal of the runoff that's currently running south now would be captured by the street and then transition to the west. So the drainage that she was referencing along the back sides of lots 25, 24, 23, and 22, the petitioner at the neighborhood meeting that we attended indicated they'd be able to do some minor grading. There's a drainage easement that they are showing through a portion of 25 to help grade that down towards the street. So that will capture some of that runoff from those backyards and get it to the street into those storm inlets. So that should address a lot of the concerns about runoff on here. And then in regards to the accel decel lanes, that is something that the city and the engineering department, that is a practice that we are no longer in favor of, and are actually working to remove those in several situations around the city. They create dangerous obstacles for pedestrians walking, as it creates a gap in sidewalks and creates a much wider area that people have to traverse oftentimes. So that's just a change in general engineering policy, and certainly Commissioner Seaborg can address that if I'm missing anything on that. But that is a practice that we are no longer incorporating or allowing as part of developments. So I hope that that's able to help address some of those comments.
Thank you.
Any other additional questions or comments?
I think Mr. Riggert raised his hand as well to be able to address those questions.
Oh,
Yes.
Please
Thanks,
go ahead.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah. So in addition to what Eric was mentioning about stormwater management on that south property line, we've graded in a berm to help divert the stormwater that comes south past through the backyards of the homes that would be on the south side of the street. That's directed toward the west, and then it goes through a culvert and ends up being piped up into the storm sewer system that runs along the south side of the road. And then that all ends up over in the detention basin. So we've made an effort to go above and beyond matching storm events and so forth to collect more of any runoff that comes between the road and the backyards up to Peppergrass, and collect it and divert it. And then during construction, we are obligated to implement best management practices for erosion control, and that would include silt fence or filter socks, as well as the berm and diverting the stormwater around. So there are measures that are part of our erosion control plan, or SWIP, Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, that CBU would be reviewing both hand in hand with the drainage. So hopefully we've got it all addressed and to the satisfaction of the reviewers and also hopefully the homeowners in Peppergrass. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, additional questions or comments or motions? I think we have a number of options before us that are possible here. Just as a reminder, the staff recommendation is that we adopt the proposed findings and approve the primary plat of DP 822, and approve the waiver of a second hearing with 7 conditions. So that is the staff recommendation. We could certainly entertain a motion to that effect. Or another motion. Oh, yes, Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
The motion, it conforms to sending it to a second hearing with clarification from staff, from the city. Which motion might that be? I would like to advocate for that motion.
You can,
if
you can
possible.
simply move that we continue this to a second hearing, or continue this to a second hearing at the May meeting.
I'd like to move that we move it to a second hearing with the further clarifications that we've specified about the stub road.
We'll need to know what those clarifications are, because I don't think we've gotten a list of things that need to be clarified.
Yeah, so why don't we do this? There's a motion on the table. Is there a second for that motion? Before we go any further, we'll need a second. No? Okay, well, I'm sorry, that motion dies then for lack of a second. So then we are on back to the commission for another motion. Commissioner Seaborn, go ahead.
I guess not a motion, but a question to staff just on the process, recognizing the UDO typically suggests a second hearing in this type of situation, just to understand maybe the background for that, and there have been some questions that have been raised tonight. So just to kind of walk through that.
The rationale for why it's normally second hearing?
Yeah.
Sure. So I think 2 hearings are prescribed for our larger petitions. So I would say that historically, primary plats are of some size. So when you look at the surrounding subdivisions to this one, typically much larger than this one. And so I think containing lots of detail or questions. And so this type of petition, as well as rezones, which can often contain also a lot of detail and questions, and beginning PUDs. Those are all, by rule, required to have 2 hearings. 2 hearings is really the default. All of the types of petitions I didn't mention are exempted in the rules of procedure. So site plans can go for 1 hearing, or primary plats that don't have waivers. So because they are requesting a waiver for the cul-de-sac, then they cannot be heard in 1 hearing without a waiver of second hearing. So I think the general idea is just to have time to air the issues for petitions that are typically larger. I would say obviously this petition has issues that have been raised. Are they the types of issues that the petitioner will be able to address before a second hearing? Will there be changes that can be made to address the concerns that were had? I don't know, that's something for you all to weigh, but I think that's why 2 hearings are usually put in, so that those types of things can be done if need be. Did that answer your question?
It did, thank you.
Great.
Maybe I'll ask another question while commissioners are gathering their thoughts. Eric, could you comment on why staff believe that the cul-de-sac to the east is acceptable, while believing that we still needed a stub road to the north? Why do we not need a stub road to the east if we need one to the north?
We would absolutely love to have a stub road to the east. There's just not a location or an opportunity to connect something to. If there is any gap in a property line that indicated an access easement, or a lot that, maybe was going to be redeveloped in some manner, then we would absolutely be stubbing it to one of those adjacent property lines. As you can see in Peppergrass to the south, you've got buildings that are separating between the roads and this property. Likewise to the Sherwood Oaks, you've got houses on every single lot. There were no alley connections, there were no undeveloped tracks that were in there. There just are no opportunities. So that is something that we look at, and this is not something that, we've just now looked at, this was something that was a hotly debated discussion back in 2007 when this petition originally came forward, were appropriate road connections. And nothing has materialized in the past 15 years on adjacent properties for those road connections. Stubbing it to the north was the only possible opportunity. And so that's the reason. The cul-de-sac is the result of, as I said before, those past missed opportunities to create road stubs to adjacent properties that would give you better opportunities in the future to have those connections.
But, isn't that the point, though, that, road stubs are sort of never required now? They're never necessary in the moment. They're only necessary as future development or redevelopment occurs. So, how would you respond to the argument that the parcel to the north is developed just like the parcels to the east are developed?
Sure. So, the parcel to the north, it's about 8 acres in size, and it has one single-family residence on that. Certainly, as the owners of that property have stated, they've put a lot of time and money into that property, and they plan to be there for a while. However, as I mentioned previously, we are planning for the long-term future. You can't go back 50 years in the past and say, oh, no, we should have got this connection, or here was the opportunity, let's get it in now. We've got to get that in now. So getting that road stub in to the north makes sense now because this is that opportunity. We're not going to have another chance that this property is most likely going to be developed or redeveloped in the next 100, 150 years. Certainly, if the Planning Commission feels that there would be a good connection opportunity to the east or to the south, that we should create a stub rather than a cul-de-sac, then I think we would be very interested in any thoughts or suggestions for those opportunities. However, given the existing layout of those properties, we're struggling to see where that connection opportunity might be practical.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Whistler, can I add to that? Or,
Sure.
This may not clarify, so hopefully it will. I think for us, when we're looking at potential future development, so the property to the north is like 4.5 acres, actually. It's a little bit smaller than Eric said.
Oh,
and it does
sorry.
have, that's okay, just to, it does have a beautiful home on it where one, family as defined by code is using this 4.5 acres, and that's great. But for us, it's more likely that that property would develop within the horizon of, say, our long-range plan, which is the next 30 years, than that the 5 properties to the east of this development site would all sell. Someone would replat that and put a stub through so that they could connect and have, 1 or 2 less houses there. It's just unlikely that that will happen. That, as you're saying, you're kind of looking farther, I think, to the future than we are, maybe on the planning horizon, but we feel that the property to the north is more likely to develop in a way that could facilitate a connection than the property to the east. And that's why we are suggesting the stub to the north and allowing or recommending allowance of the cul-de-sac to the east.
So you're just making a judgment call that that's more likely to happen.
I would say an educated
if we look far
professional
enough into the
guess, yeah.
future, isn't it true that they're all equally likely to eventually be redeveloped?
I think it's possible, yes. I think with an educated professional guess would be that the vacant land will develop, is more likely to develop than that area that's already developed be redeveloped. We haven't seen, and Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of platted single family where homes have been developed, scraped, and redeveloped thus far.
Thank you. Sorry.
I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding things a little bit clearly here. So basically the developer's gone by the letter of the law here, by which the UDO has required them. They've done everything there. And this is something to me that says if a developer is willing to come in to put 37 homes in and also be able to say, well, I that's a beautiful home. It's a beautiful lot. You guys have done beautiful things to it. To be able to say a developer is willing to help us in the long-term planning of more housing in this community, to me, that is a much clearer picture and a much clearer path than being reactive after the fact, which it sounds like you guys are saying that's exactly what we've been doing for far too long. That taxpayers shouldn't have to pay for. That's just kind of where I'm coming from with why I think this, to me, it's a very micro positioning that we're continuing on this point. If we zoom out from that in the macro, I really feel like, that is a very well-educated guess that the development would happen to the north versus the east. Being in real estate, knowing where property, land values, and everything's falling right now, and the feasibility, I think that's very well suited. So I guess I just wanted to clarify my point there.
Commissioner Cochran, go ahead.
So I have a couple of comments, and then I'd like to actually make a motion. So, Mr. Ramsey, thank you so much for being here. You have a beautiful home, and I love what you've done with your home, and I hope you have many, many years on that site, because I think it's great. One question that I do have, is it a historic home? Is it a historic designation? Okay. Not on the register or anything, I was just curious. Yeah, well, it could, yes, it could be, yeah. So my thought is we do need more housing, and the thought of building a road for future development today, knowing that the homeowners that are going to go there are going to bear that cost, because ultimately it's going to fall on those homeowners to pay for this today for the future development of later. But I do agree with Ms. Scanlon and the thoughts of we do need future housing. I do believe in our code. I feel it's super well thought out. I do believe in the safety, as Commissioner Enright Randolph had mentioned, the transportation, and the future development. Again, the thought of this going unused for 50 years bothers me. I hope that's not the case. But I do think that your site does have potential for future development. Yeah, please.
Why can't there not be a compromise with an easement? You have to make the structure for the underlying road. Just make an easement. We'd be okay with that.
Yeah, typically, we don't have a period for back and forth with the audience here.
Yeah.
But if you want to just quickly make comment, come to the microphone to do so we can hear what you're saying.
Okay, so let me just say that we actually support this development, okay? Point number one. Mm-hmm. Point number two, compromise, make an easement. Put in the underlying structure, make an easement, make everybody happy.
Thank you.
Well, the thought was, and where I was headed was to actually make a motion. I can make a motion and we could discuss it. So I'd like to make a motion for approval of TP 0822 with the 6 conditions as recommended by staff.
7 in the packet. Now.
Okay.
There was a 7th added in the presentation. There were 6 in the packet. 7th was added to the staff recommendation. So your motion is to include all 7 of these conditions.
Absolutely. And then I would like to just have that on the floor and we can discuss it from there.
All right. There is a motion to approve DP 0822 to adopt the proposed findings and approve the primary plat and to approve the waiver of second hearing along with the 7 conditions as was recommended by staff. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
We had a race there.
I'll also clarify, I know it doesn't say it there, I think it says it in the packet, the primary plat with the 1 waiver as well. Not the waiver of second hearing, but the actual waiver that allows the cul-de-sac. Sorry about that. is the staff proposed motion.
Yeah, so that's condition number 5.
Oh, okay, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. I thought it was in the recommendation. That's fine, I think. Thanks.
Yes, that waiver is condition 5, right. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion, any comments on the motion to approve?
I have one question that might be for staff about this suggested compromise of creating an easement on this, and I don't know if that would follow the UDO. My apprehension about that is whether that would at all satisfy the requirements specified in the UDO, if that could substitute at all.
Yep, so absolutely, so that's a good question. So the easement, it really doesn't solve the problem of the road connection being required to be built. So with this development, this would be a public road running through here. The property to the north that is very likely to be redeveloped, hopefully sometime in the next 50 years or whatever, would also have a public road running through there. So we don't like to have private roads joining together 2 public roads. It makes maintenance of that very difficult. With private roads, you're also then forcing the homeowners association here to maintain that road in perpetuity. They have to plow it. They have to fix any cracks that happen in there. So it doesn't change the fact that the road still has to be constructed. Having it a public road allows for it to be installed right now, allows for the city to own and maintain and control that in perpetuity. So the platting of it as an easement really just creates more problems than it attempts to solve.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? Commissioner Seabour.
I guess just make some comments. Some of the questions and ideas that are being brainstormed, it's been a topic of discussion among staff and through the process of this project, recognizing maintenance, potential impacts. I think just as a result of those conversations, I'll just say I'm inclined to support the motion that's on the table. I think just through those conversations, realizing really the importance of connectivity and that this is the way to assure that the potential of connectivity is preserved. Without this, it is extremely challenging and or at the city's expense, and this is a situation where the city does not need to front those costs, as have been raised by other questions by the commission. So just wanted to share some of those feedback and I trust staff and know that a lot of these things have been discussed in depth over the last period of time.
Thank you. Additional comments from commissioners? Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
I just wish we'd get to a compromise area and, make it an easement. I'm not really sure I understand why we need to do that. And the city does pay for roads. So it's kind of like, okay, it would be a compromise to a human need and a concern. So I would like to advocate for thinking about the human desires and how we do developments. The UDO is a living document. It's not perfect. We all know that. So even if it has specifications that require or strongly suggest, we still have the latitude to ask for a compromise for people that live in our city, and so that's where I'm at. I understand the issue of connectivity, and I understand what safety, but it is really important for us to respond to our citizens, and this doesn't look like that big of a compromise to me. And again, the city pays for roads anyway, so I really appreciate Mr. Gerlich and Ms. Scanlon's opinions and all the commissioners up here. I just have a different take on it, so thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I would echo some of those thoughts. I mean, this is a pretty difficult situation. You know, I wholeheartedly agree that we need to have these stub roads for future connectivity, and you can see all over the place that we're paying the price for not having these in the past. We have more and more developments coming before us that have no way to connect to the existing road system. And just, you know, to underscore that, the reason for this is that the grid, a traffic grid absorbs traffic. If there's only one way to get from point A to point B, then everybody is on the same road, and that's what causes congestion. If you've got multiple ways to get to a destination, then the traffic is absorbed into the grid. And so this is long-term planning. This is why we have a plan commission, a planning department. We're planning for the future, not just dealing with what's on the ground today. That being said, you know, we have other places in code where we are able to make these sorts of compromises in order to meet affordable housing requirements. We often allow a developer to make a contribution to the trust fund rather than building specific units on site on their development right now. It would not be hard for the city to do something similar, to say, you don't have to build it now, you have to dedicate the easement, and you have to make a contribution to a future construction fund. There is a compromise that is possible. It's just not possible within the current code. And so to your point about the UDO being a living document, this is an opportunity for us to create a mechanism to fix this in the future. And I would also just say that it's been mentioned several times tonight that this petitioner has followed the letter of the law, and to no fault of the petitioner, but I don't think that's entirely true, right? The law is not super specific, because if we would have really followed the letter of the law, there would be 3 road stubs, one going to the north, one going to the east, and one going to the south, in order to create all that possible future connectivity. So clearly, there is some discretion left to, at least to staff, probably to us as a commission, as to what we say meets that requirement for road stubs. So I don't think this is a completely binary decision that, yeah, it's this or nothing. I mean, there are several other ways that you could create additional connectivity in this lot. And so it is the discretion of staff, it's staff's opinion that this one road stub is the one that we should do, and that a cul-de-sac, which is not allowed by the letter of the law, is okay in this case. So I think it's reasonable to disagree with that. We can all have different opinions on that, and I do disagree with that. Even though I don't disagree at all that the principle of this is correct and that we need to require these. We can't say that because the neighboring properties didn't create opportunities for connectivity, that's a reason to not do it here. The only reason I'm not sure we need to do it, I'm not saying, I think we need to do it here. I'm just not sure this is the right way to do it. And I'm not sure I understand if we're really planning for the long term, I understand the rationale that we should allow a cul-de-sac here, where clearly to the east, there's more useful connections. To the north, at best, you're going to get through one lot and back over to Walnut Street Pike. So I guess my point is I'm not sure I agree with the rationale for the way the discretion has been applied in this case, but I certainly agree that as a matter of principle, we need to be requiring these kinds of stubs. So very difficult decision for me tonight. Any other final comments before we call the roll? All right, Darla, would you please call the roll on the motion to approve DP 822?
Okay, Burrell,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Seymour.
Yes.
Is Herrera there yet?
He is not.
Okay, thank you. Smith
No.
and Whistler.
No.
Thank you.
All right, the motion carries, and DP 0822 is approved with the 7 conditions in the packet. We are on now to our final agenda item, our final petition for the evening, SP 15-22, Walnut Star LLC. This is a property at 3391 South Walnut Street. And again, we have Eric Grulich here to present.
Thank you. Yes, this is a request from Cedar View Management for property at 3391 South Walnut Street. The property is zoned mixed-use corridor, and the petitioners are here tonight to request major site plan approval to allow for the construction of a multifamily development here with 103 dwelling units. So this site might seem familiar to the Planning Commission as you looked at this just last year at the end of this for a 2-lot subdivision to create these 2 lots, and then later for a site plan for this specific parcel to allow for a autism therapy school. That site plan or that petition was not able to come to fruition. So the landowner has come forward with a different proposal for the site to develop that with multifamily units. So to the east of this, you have multifamily zoning with a series of multifamily buildings, some duplexes, some apartment buildings. To the north of this, you have an office building, and then to the south, you have a dog training center, and then to the west, some various other institutional uses, the National Guard Armory, the recycling center, the animal shelter. So this site is undeveloped. As I mentioned, it was platted late last year. And the petitioners are coming forward now to develop that with a multifamily product. This would feature 4 multifamily buildings with parking lots on the interior, as well as a common building and pool area. There would be 1 access cut on Walnut Street that is in approximately the exact same location that was previously approved with the autism therapy school. That location meets all of the setback requirements from adjacent drives. So there's no issue in that regard. This petition would have 103 dwelling units and 105 bedrooms. So majority of the units are all 1-bedroom apartments. The buildings would have 4 stories in most of them. They do have a mix of some of the stories and footprints to help meet the diversity and anti-monotony standards. There is a buffer yard type 1 required along the north property line because this is multifamily up against commercial. So that is required to be planted with appropriate trees, spaced every 30 feet as petitioner has shown. The proposed site plan meets all of the landscaping requirements. They have incorporated rain gardens within the interior of the site to capture stormwater runoff. As well as the islands within the parking area have appropriate curb cuts to allow for stormwater to infiltrate each of those. So as is required, the petitioner has given us some renderings and elevations of the proposed buildings. As I mentioned, these would be 3-story buildings with a building in the back. Building 4 would be a 2-story building. And then you have the clubhouse and pool area in the center of the site. So I'll just kind of briefly step through some of the elevations. This is building elevation number 1 for the building facing Walnut Street. The petitioner is required to have the primary pedestrian entrance, which they have shown on the center of the building. All of the buildings have a series of modulations around the perimeter, change in building height, and have various materials shown within the building footprint. You've got a masonry building with some fiber cement lap siding, as well as some board and batten siding to help give vertical and horizontal elements within the buildings. They also have patios shown on the exterior of the buildings as well to give the residents an area to enjoy the exterior and the outside. So all of the approved, or all of the buildings have approved building materials as a finish. So there are no issues with the architecture. Building 4, which is the building in the back, would have a covered bike area in an outside storage room on the west side of the site. I noted in the staff report that that might need to be increased in size in order to provide the 3 required long-term bike storage area requirements. All of the buildings would have covered bike parking in a central hallway corridor. So they would be covered and accessible to all of the residents on the property as well. And I can kind of step through some of the renderings as well, just kind of give you a better idea of the look and feel of the buildings. These are just kind of moving throughout the site, showing the respective fronts. There would be some carports shown as well to provide covered parking for the vehicles, which is an additional amenity. So with that, we are recommending approval. The petition meets all of the requirements of the zoning code. There are no variances that are being requested with this petition. So we are recommending approval with the 6 conditions that are listed in staff's report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Grulich. Is there a representative of the petitioner who would like to add anything to the presentation?
Eric, do you know who's speaking tonight? Or somebody can raise their hand. Okay, great. Thanks, Zach. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. This is Zach Bodie with Studio 3 Design, representing the petitioner. I just wanted to thank Mr. Grulich for presenting the project, and really have no additional items to add. Everything was laid out very well, and happy to answer any questions that might come up.
Thank you. Are there questions from commissioners, either for staff or for the petitioner? No questions. Oh, go ahead.
There are 5 electric cars stations, correct? For the whole place?
Yes, they are. They are required to have electric vehicle charging stations. I believe 5 spaces are required, and those would be shown on the site plan with the grading permit. I think they've identified where those will be going, although they're not shown as near as I can tell on the site plan currently, but they are aware of that requirement, so they would be shown.
Yeah, I was just.
The petitioner might be able to speak to that if they've incorporated them.
My question is, what is the ratio of, electric car stations to residents, I guess?
I think it's 1 for every 25 vehicular. I can look that up real quick for you and give you.
That's correct, Eric.
Okay.
So does that meet the requirements with how many? It seems low, that's why I'm asking.
Yes, it meets the UDO requirement for the electric vehicle charging stations.
Yeah, it is 1 parking space for every 25 parking space provided on site.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Kinsey.
I remember when we reviewed this site for the previous autism facility, and I remember there was a concern about the roadway coming into the property, and there was some concern about traffic and access. And I wonder if, I know that's not necessarily outlined in the plans that we see here today, and that there's just a mention of a driveway onto the site, into the site from Walnut Street on the north side to provide access to the parking area. What is is there additional road space? I can't get a sense from those renderings if there is additional roadways within the property itself, or if it just goes all to the same parking lot. Can you clarify some of that, Eric? Or the petitioner?
Yeah, absolutely. So the discussion that we had with the autism therapy school was mostly in relation to the drop-off times and pick-up times and stacking spaces within the parking area to accommodate that. So that's certainly a much different discussion with residential, as you don't have that short window where everybody's coming and going and leaving from a site. Yeah, so that was the main premise behind the discussion that you were remembering from the last hearings.
Yeah, thanks. That does help, but I still don't know if I see how the parking, where is the parking? The site plan that you have on there now, there's the roadway and then parking is right there. So that's as far in as they come. Around.
Yeah, so the parking is required to be 20 feet behind the front. So they have put the parking completely all the way behind the building. And they've got a pretty good length of driveway. It's about 100 feet or so that leads into the site. So there's lots of room coming in and leaving the site for cars to be able to safely get in and have visibility.
Yeah, no concerns about stacking on that. I mean, it looks short. I don't know how to evaluate that, but stacking coming in or going out, I guess coming in.
I don't think we heard any of that this time because with the model of the last use, we were concerned that it would be like at pinch points in time.
All at the same
where
time.
here it would be more like the average trips a day, stretched across the day, like in most residential areas.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from commissioners? Go ahead, Tron.
I guess I'm just trying to really look at the stormwater and the drainage from this site plan, from the previous site plan, and I'm assuming that they're complying with everything, but it's a little difficult to follow, so I guess just bear with me. It looks like they're putting a lot of impervious surface on this new proposal, and this does fall within the critical drainage area for Monroe County, and I'm just kind of curious, did you kind of look at that calculation of kind of the added impervious surface with kind of the release rate? Because I'm following along quite a bit, and we've been doing some review here, so I'm looking at kind of all of these areas of interest on the prior plat and just trying to kind of look at them side by side. I'm not seeing how all of the same stormwater areas and storm sewer areas are the same as the previous plat with this new proposal. So if you could address that a bit.
Yeah, I think Mr. Brehoff with the petitioner would probably be the most qualified person to address that.
Yeah, if I could, Tron, in looking at this site plan, you're not seeing the proposed grading. You'll notice there's a big open area just to the north of the drive, and that whole entire area is one large stormwater retention area. So there's sufficient room on site to meet all of the drainage and detention requirements for this project.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted you to address that. There's a lot of shifting around, so thank you.
And I'll just certainly point out that this is required to have a minimum of 40% landscaped area, which this does meet.
Thank you. Commissioner St. John.
For Mr. Grulich. On the condition number, let's see, 5, it says the building adjacent to building number 4 needs to be bigger to accommodate 3 bikes. Where is that building? I didn't see it on the map, on the drawing.
So building number 4 is the eastern building here, and I'll just kind of circle that for you. So this is building 4, and then their outdoor or their bike storage room is this thing right here. So it's kind of a long, narrow hallway area. And so I was just concerned that they will have, because you're supposed to have 3 feet of clearance on both sides of racks. So I was not clear on measuring the dimensional floor plan if that was able to be accommodated in that. So we'll just verify that with the building permit to make sure that there is room in there and that it meets the clearance on both sides of racks on all 4 sides for bicycles.
Okay, so it says that it must be sized to accommodate the 3 required bicycle spaces? Is that for 3 bikes?
Yes. Yes. So the long-term bike parking requires 1/4 of the total amount of bicycle spaces you're required to be covered long-term storage. So out of the total number of bicycle spaces that they are required, they've got to have a minimum of 3. So 21 spaces is what they're required for bicycle. So 1/4 of that would be the 3. So they just need to be able to accommodate those 3 in that building.
So 1/4 of the 21
Yes.
is 3? No.
4, sorry.
Yeah, that's not either. I think it's like 5 plus, right?
It's actually 5.5, if I can chime in.
Okay,
Sorry,
there you
this is
go.
Zach.
Sorry.
And we believe we have the space there for that, Eric, but we will obviously work with planning to make sure that we have the correct space in those rooms. And one other clarification from your question, it is not a separate building, it is part of building 4.
Okay, so
3
that's,
racks. So each rack can house 2 bikes, so they need to make sure they have at least 6
3
spaces
racks.
so
total.
it's 3 required, so it's 6
So we can
bikes,
just say
3
6,
racks.
we could change
Yeah.
it to 6
Okay,
spaces,
it just seemed, it popped out because that seemed like a very low number of bikes to
Yes.
require, so.
Perfect,
I
thank
didn't remember the exact number for the UDO, so I appreciate you clarifying that, Mr. Grulich. So it sounds like condition number 5 would actually be 6 required bicycle spaces? Okay, thank you.
Yes. Sorry. Three racks, 6 spaces.
Yep, thank you so much.
Go ahead.
So there was a little off-site improvement going on in the last petition. Is that still something that we have here?
So with the plat, they were required to install the compliant side path along the Walnut Street frontage. So that was on the property to the south of this. But that was something that is addressed with the plat with that they have to bond for that improvement. So that'll either happen within the 3-year time period that we have for public improvement bonds, or if the property to the south redevelops within that 3-year time period, it would happen then.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we weren't losing that with the new proposal.
No.
Any additional questions from commissioners? All right, seeing none, we will go to public comment. If you are here to make comment on SP 15-22, make your way to the podium. Or if you're online and would like to make comment, click that reactions button and click on the raise hand button, and we will recognize you for up to 5 minutes.
There are no reactions and no hands on the Zoom.
And it looks like no one here in person either. So last call for public comment on SP 15-22. All right. Well, we are back to the commission then for any additional questions, comments, or a motion. Commissioner Cochran.
I'd like to just thank the developer because this is your second run looking at this infill site, and I appreciate your effort on this. And when I originally look at this site and I look at the surrounding area, I would have not have chosen multifamily. However, the more I think about it and I see its location in relation to Crane and on the south side and our dire need for more housing in this community, the more I like it. So I will support this petition. And again, thank you for your effort on focusing on this site.
Commissioner Kinsey.
I'll motion to approve the proposed site plan and recommendations that we adopt the proposed findings and approve SP 1522 with the 6 conditions with the 1 correction to, oh my gosh, Eric already made the correction, or somebody made the correction, to 6 but required bicycle spaces.
Okay, so your motion is to adopt the proposed findings and approve SP 1522 with the conditions as shown on the screen currently.
Yes.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any final comment? All right, I'll just say, I agree with Commissioner Cockrum. I would not have thought multifamily was a great use here. I think it can be. There are a lot of amenities nearby. If we can get connectivity between here and some of the amenities to the north and south that don't require every one of these folks to get in a car and drive on Walnut, this could be a very great development. If we don't create that connectivity, this could just add to congestion on South Walnut. So I'm happy to support this, but I'd say this does create some more work for us to do. All right, any more final comment before we call the roll? All right, Darla, will you please call the roll on the motion to approve SP 1522?
Seaboard,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
and Cockrum.
Yes.
And Herrera didn't show?
Herrera's is not here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. That motion passes, and that is the final item on our agenda this evening. So thank you all for coming, and we are adjourned. We'll see you in May.